but I clicked on the on button, so we are started, and welcome to Tokyo Tonight 2. My name is Iko Simon. It is Sunday night, 10:40 Japan time, as it is every week. It is wonderful to see you all. I'm just checking that names are that comments are popping up, which I hope that they are. But yes, there we go. Boom, James Kelly, we've got you. So welcome to Tokyo Tonight 2. I have a wee bit of a cold at the moment. I just had some. If you're ever in Japan and you have a cold and you don't have proper cold medicine, this isn't actual proper medicine. It's like Chinese medicine, like made into a packet that makes it look like legit medicine. But Pabron, this stuff works pretty well for me. So I just had a bit of this. It makes me a bit drowsy, which means I'm probably going to go to sleep after this. However, I'm going to. I'm good. I'm worried about my voice a little bit, but I've got some water, and we can go through what's been going on this week. And you know, the first thing, as I've indicated in the title, actually, is that yeah, I've kind of like, I think we've hit on this show. I've become self-conscious lately. I've been trying very hard now for like a year to not talk about you know, Donald Trump, even though there's so much. It's like you know, rage clickbait. I find a lot of news from America are about Trump, and it's by design. It's on purpose. So I've really tried, and you've noticed on the show, I really try not to talk about the American president very often. But you know, instead of that, I try to just focus on Japan topics. And what's always loomed large around Japan news has been Korea-related stuff, and you know. It's just been a bad relationship that's become more and more toxic lately, and it's really kind of hit peak toxic this week. And I noticed myself, I was starting to feel that kind of post Kentucky Fried Chicken self-hating and loathing and, you know, regret after posting tweets about the Korean news lately, because it's just so relentless, and you know, it's negative, and even talking about it and trying to make sense of it, which is what I try to do on the show. I try to show you guys the news that we see here in Japan and give you a little bit of extra context so that you know what's going on, and you know, help all you guys out with it, looking at it like it's normal news. And I can only imagine, if you're someone covering American news, how challenging it must be with things being so crazy over there. But you know, with Idiocracy, you know, that was supposed to take 500 years to happen, and it's happened in like 10 years since that movie was made. We've already gotten there, and it's increasingly hard. I started to become aware it was like sharing like outrage clickbait on Facebook. That's what it started to feel like. I started to feel guilty sharing the NHK news about relations with Korea, mainly because, you know, I want relations to be good. On the one hand, and the problem is, it's not that I don't, you know, I do get wrapped up in the news stories. I do feel outraged. I do feel like this is stupid, and yet at the same time, you sort of feel afterwards like, yeah, I feel like I got sucked in to like tweeting about that, and I need to get away from that. So I think I challenged myself for a week. Was it a week or a month? In fact, I think that's my first topic here. So wasn't that one. Here we go. Lately, when I read news about Korea or America, I feel that sense of emptiness and personal embarrassment I get after watching MTV reality shows. Basically, like, you know, eating junk food. Like, you know, you've just ingested something that was satisfying, that you're sort of craving for, but you feel guilty and kind of feel crap about afterwards. Considering taking a week, so I'm going to take a week, including the show, where I'm not going to talk about topics, although there's been a lot to talk about. I will only say this, that you know, the withdrawal from the security agreement with Japan, and there's actually a lot of like to talk about with that. There's a lot to unpack, but there's so much other stuff happening around that at the moment, and it's so negative. And besides, you know, the US stuff with the elections coming up, and you know, all American companies being ordered out of China, and all the craziness happening there, it's actually just a little bit too much. So I'm actually doing this in the same way that people take. I'm not taking a social media break or a news break. I'm just going to focus on news that's not that stuff, because I can talk about it for an hour, and frankly, I'll just feel crappy afterwards. So yeah, and Sergeant Bilko, you've actually hit on the other topic, which I actually put on the start tonight, which is the fire in the Amazon as well, which is just something that I tweeted randomly about. That's not Japan related, but I'm also happy to talk to this as well. So I'll focus on that instead, as well as a lot of other stuff. Yeah. So tonight, great news. I'm not talking about Korea, and I'm not going to. I'm not going to talk about. I'm going to stick to not talking about Trump, or at least minimizing that. Doesn't mean I won't talk a little bit about America here and there, but so hopefully you'll enjoy it, and we'll see. Hopefully we'll see if I can cleanse a little bit this week, and the world can calm down. First of all, let's see who's in the comments. I see I've got Steve from Berkeley, good to see you. James Kelly, hi. We've got the J-Vlog giving salutations. Sergeant Bilko, good to see you. Quentin Rankin, great to see you. Soppy, good to see Soppy, who doesn't watch a lot of live stuff, but you made it here, so great to have you here in the comments. And remember, you can participate. To all the people here, just do it at Mark Equals Simon. I'm looking at the comments on the side here. It'll pop up orange on my little side screen, and you can join in the show. You can actually give me topics to talk about. Who else we got? Dan H, good to see you. Martin Orlando, good to see you. Who else we got? We've got Matthew Fontaine Sir. Hope I pronounced that correctly, and good to have you. And it's another name I don't recognize, so that's good. We've got Nissan R33Z2, good to see you. Watching this while going for a night drive in the mountains of Tochigi. Be careful, don't get car sick. But that's very that's very old school sort of drift anime style in the mountains of Tochigi there. That's pretty cool. Wrong account too. I know it's Kengen Kodos. That's cool. And yes, that's everyone at the moment. Didn't Japan have a paper plant in the Amazon somewhere? Well, the Amazon's pretty big, so who knows. So let's talk about the Amazon first. The fires in the Amazon, and the whole world at the moment. And I kind of I saw Leonardo DiCaprio was tweeting that everyone pray for the Amazon, and it's kind of the French president scolding the Brazilian president, and the Brazilian president, like a lot of presidents lately, just being another in a long list of world leader assheads at the moment, saying that the fires are a conspiracy to make him look bad, and they're being set by environmentalists to make them look bad, and foreign agents and whatnot in Brazil, and all the kind of stupidness that's happening around that. Plus, remembering that part of what he became elected for. Thank you, Matthew. I'm glad I got that right. Part of what he got elected for was this idea that he was going to, a bit like American, Tea Party type people. He wasn't, going to be ashamed of Brazil using its natural resources, and remembering that most of Brazil really is still developing. I mean, parts of Brazil are rich and very developed, and parts are not. And the parts where the Amazon are building. In fact, I saw something this afternoon, which kind of confirmed. It was after I tweeted this message this evening, actually, that I saw this, and it kind of follows along what I was assuming, which is true. One, the burning of jungle is definitely not unique to Brazil. It happens in Southeast Asia, particularly Indonesia. There's a smog over, that stops like air traffic over Singapore and Malaysia for a few months in the year, and that's been there since when I lived there when I was a kid. Burning and slashing is how you clear land. When New Zealand was colonized, that's what we did. We slashed and burned the entire country, turned it all into farms. The whole Protestant work ethic was about taking arable land that it was immoral to let land go to waste, and to put it to maximum use, to put it as much as possible, and turning it into cities or into agriculture. And hey, Tim the Asian, good to see you. Pray for the Amazons. What good is that? Plus, people could take that the wrong way. So with basically the wealth of Australia, New Zealand, and Canada, the entire New World. I mean, the entire Canada and United States, France, Britain. It's based upon deforesting and turning every bit of usable land into farmland and cities and whatnot. This is how we provide food for ourselves, and this was the backbone against which we became modern, developed, rich countries. Linux 360, good to see you, and or is that Linus? Linus 360, good to see you. I don't know why I got my tongue tripped on that. And Tai Nakamura, awesome to see you. So there's this New York Times thing pointing out, basically what's happening in Brazil is from one context, and to look at this, and I'm not saying this for whataboutism. It's necessary to understand the problem and to be able to actually come up with meaningful solutions to it, to understand what the problem is. And the problem is that in Brazil, poor farmers who are looking to, hey, very like this, good to see you as well. poor farmers, you know, are basically looking to, you know, survive by expanding their farms and expanding their land to use for agriculture, beef and soybeans primarily. And you know, when they can't afford to buy, you know, available already usable farmland, they slash and burn, or landowners will slash and burn jungle to be able to push out and create new farms. And Brazil's a developing country, and they want to develop just like the rest of us. You know, it's like the whole world. We've gone and slashed and burned and covered our countries, including my country, you know, in grazing land and farms and so on. And we all want to get angry at Brazil for slashing and burning its forest. Now, of course, the burning of the Amazon is, you know, I mean, the world's lungs, and it has an impact on us. And we're looking at what's been happening with climate change recently. And bear in mind, my interest in this goes back to when I was in college, when I was deciding what I was going to invest in for the future. What I thought the two big things that would have the biggest economic impact in my lifetime, the things that I chose to focus on as a specialty, was not finance, and it wasn't, you know, corporate law. It was the Kyoto Protocol, which was fresh in 1997, and I specialized in it, and I worked in the field of policy consulting around it for a number of years. And IT, I focused on those two things. And it's kind of funny, IT has gone like this, and really sustainability, like in the late 90s and early 2000s, looked like it was going on the same peak in terms of, you know, the impact on the economy of sustainability and making sure, you know, effective climate change policies and the way it was supposed to, the onus to transform the economy to prevent runaway climate change. It was a really, really big ask. And you know, if we realized that this is basically to save our species from extinction, you know, there really would have been enormous changes that somewhere along the lines in the 2000s we just sort of lost the motivation and focus to do, and we've kind of given up. And we've actually seen, you know, the IPCC has been giving, you know, forecasts about, you know, ranges of middle, you know, conservative and kind of panic-inducing forecasts of climate change. And what we are seeing happening is consistent with the very worst models of, it looks like we're getting pretty close to runaway climate change, like before we can, faster than we thought we were going to do, even on the bad models. We're seeing, you know, the Greenland, you know, glaciers and everything melt, and, you know, we're seeing things which mean probably within the lifetime, certainly of my son, and even within my lifetime now, it looks like that human-triggered climate change is really going to, like, adversely affect, you know, pretty much humanity. I mean, it's already having dire consequences. You look at these wars and, you know, famines and migrations. It's already playing a role in that, and it's going to exacerbate. So, of course, from that perspective, burning the Amazon, and you know, taking an already bad situation and doing, you know, the one thing that's kind of holding back, and that's kind of, you know, working against all the carbon that we're putting in the air, the Amazon rainforest, seeing the Brazilians cutting it down. Of course, you know, all these rich celebrities and French presidents and so on, they're all getting very upset about it. But, you know, as I pointed out on Twitter today, what bugs me about this is that we're getting angry at poor farmers, you know, slashing and burning jungle in order to grow soybeans and beef to sell to us to be able to subsist and survive. And yet we've given up ourselves. You know, no country is really accepting, or most countries have dropped these kind of binding, aggressive, necessary emission reduction goals. You know, Japan's given up on nuclear power, as has Germany. I mean, if you're really serious about limiting carbon emissions, you can't do it without nuclear power. And, you know, for me, I think Japan kind of like has lost all trust for being able to safely run nuclear power. But, you know, I mean, geez, we had Fukushima right up here, and I was here the whole time. You know, I was on YouTube and on the internet here, downwind from Fukushima, just 3 hours away. And so believe me, I know the risks, but at the same time, you know, the risk associated with nuclear power plant accidents compared to the risk of climate change, which is human extinction and endangering, you can't, you know, we might have been able to get away with it without nuclear power plants if we'd been more diligent with other things like, you know, carbon trading and, you know, actually upgrading power grids to be able to handle microgeneration better and all these other things. But we haven't done any of those things, and it's at such a dire stage right now that no country can claim to be serious about climate change. And frankly, no country has a right to be telling poor farmers in Brazil what to do with their land if they're not, frankly, converting everything into nuclear power, you know, I mean, intermittent wind and sun is great. You know, those are great for like a little chunk of the generation band. But basically, you can't, you know, there are hard decisions that, you know, Americans, celebrities are campaigning for climate change and against burning the Amazon, but at the same time, they don't want to see big windmills in Cape Cod, for example. You know, Democrats were campaigning against actual wind farms where they would ruin their view. France has been in anarchy because the people there, again, are outraged at Brazil. They don't want to pay a carbon tax in France to be able to basically factor in the cost. And you know what they should be doing is they should be taxing carbon in the developed world and paying it to those farmers in Brazil so that they don't, you know, so that they can survive without destroying that forest, if that's something that they place a value upon. So, you know, this is the whole idea of, you know, in order, and this is a survival thing, you know, you have to basically figure out how to rejig the economy. And, you know, it doesn't have to be incompatible with capitalism. This is what started to happen in the early 2000s. You can re-engineer capitalism, you know, profit loss, simply by attaching an economic value to the value of keeping those carbon sinks working and making sure that all the costs, which, you know, include the necessary policy costs of associated that will come down the road with climate change, by factoring them into the causes of climate change. You know, and that's what carbon taxes are for. And we've given up on those things, and so yeah, we're very happy criticizing poor third world people at the same time as we've given up on making any efforts ourselves. And you know, I feel like it's I mean, all of that said, you know, we should be not just criticizing essentially what are poor farmers trying to grow, you know, create land for their cows. We should be helping them out, and we should be doing a lot more ourselves. So that's my opinion on that, and this is something I've invested a big chunk of my life because, you know, I was correct. Logically, the economy now should be dominated by climate change prevention oriented, you know, rejigging of the entire economy. I'm working in IT right now because that prediction also came true, but somewhere along the line we just gave up on climate change, and now we're seeing it happening, and it's nuts. So yeah, you know, I feel like I'm not going to join in and say, you know, pray for the Amazon and you know, of course the Brazilian president looks like a dickhead, but at the same time, what's happening in developed countries, and this was what bothered me about my environmental law and my environmental politics classes, is that it's post-materialist. It's something that rich, comfortable people, people who, you know, have money and people who have comfortable lives, they start to worry. It's called post-materialism. When you achieve all your material needs, you start to worry about things that are not immediate material. You stop worrying about where your next meal is going to come from, where you know, being destitute. You start thinking about how can we make everything better. And it's kind of funny because you have a lot of, you know, rich people that look like me who feel very entitled to lecture people that are not post-material yet, you know, that have those needs met. So anyway, it annoys me when I'm seeing people who are just kind of like not seeing the big picture on this sort of thing. And frankly, you know, people should be looking at themselves pretty strongly as well, and not just simply taking the easy route and criticizing somebody else, you know, saying that they should be doing something. So yeah, anyway, that's what I think about that. Anyway, look, just checking for comments. I see Martin Orlando's left a comment. You always enjoy my show for the internal Japan stories, and you won't see anywhere else on the internet in English, so thanks so much for all I do. Very happy to do it, and that wasn't a Japan story, so all the other stories I think will be pretty much Japan related, so I will come back for that. Also see from Odie Jr., good morning. You're in a class for work today, but you'll watch the stream afterwards. Well, please enjoy your class and enjoy the stream afterwards. And you might want to skip past the episode and stuff, although too late. I guess it just finished. Christian Hugo. Good to see you there. It seems that sun and wind with battery backup and pump storage is currently comparable to nuclear under certain circumstances. Cheaper than nuclear. Yeah, actually that's a good point. Nuclear, I remember people talking about if you factor in the cost of government insurance, which usually, you know, which wind and solar have to pay for, and nuclear doesn't because it's all government subsidized. And the construction costs of nuclear are also usually government subsidized, so those are, you know, they in a sense distort. They're like socialist policies that distort the cheapness of nuclear power. But the thing is, and with pump storage, yes, in my day it was hydro, and I know people are talking about, you know, fuel cells and stuff like that now, but you know, they're improving the ability to even out the intermittent nature of solar and whatnot. But there again, I mean, the reason that Denmark can be, you know, 100% wind powered is not because they have all of these wind farms, off Denmark generating them. It's because they have France next door and they're on the same grid and they get the benefit of that huge baseload generation. Not saying that wind and solar doesn't have its place, but it belongs on top of that baseload. And the other thing is that even with pump storage, even with batteries to be able to try and offset it, you do need to have thermal power. Because basically even with pump storage you can't turn on the tap and turn it off to be able to compensate for fluctuations the same way, which is just what you get with solar and wind. Not that I'm against it. I think it's wonderful and we should keep focusing on those technologies and deploying them as much as we practically can. But for grids, if you're really serious about cutting carbon emissions in 2 or 3 years by 30%, 40%, the kind of dramatic change that we're talking about, nuclear is the only way you can achieve that. You can't achieve that with wind, not on the short time scales that we're talking about. But yes, and believe me, I'm from an anti-nuclear country. I'm living near the nuclear, the Fukushima, quadruple meltdown. So I'm aware of the risks, but I think we have to look at the situation and say it's that serious now. This isn't something that we can spend 20 years with incentives to build windmills anymore. I mean, we should keep doing that. But but actually, Christian Hugo, I know that technology is always really improving, and I think it's a super interesting area. Dan H, one of the main problems you find people focus on energy efficiency, which tends to lead to more people using more energy, and I quite agree. And it's very hippie to say, to focus on reducing energy consumption and seeing energy, energy production itself, which it is certainly, the primary contributor to climate change. But at the same time, this is exactly why we should be looking at the method of production. And again, in order to have a huge switch in carbon-based energy generation on the kind of dramatic shift in scale that you need to be able to have any impact on climate change, nuclear is the only way that you can do it. People don't like to admit that, but I remember Craig Bellamy. I mean, famous environmentalists have come out and said, environmentalists have to come to terms with the fact that they have to kind of realize that they're trading off evils, and that this is something that people have to sort of come to terms with. But yes, and long term, by the way, I'm a sci-fi geek. I'm imagining we'll have huge planet-sized solar arrays up in orbit or up in space, beaming the energy down to Earth. I hope within my lifetime we're actually going to have unlimited energy and all the things and all the the wonderful, I think, future that's going to unlock for us. I don't think we should be aiming to go back to living in caves. I don't think that's the goal. But I think we should be looking to figure fundamentally how to change the way that we get energy. Matthew asks, am I boxing too? Just notice the gloves in the background. Yeah, I do actually box 2 or 3 times a week. I do Muay Thai, kickboxing. But when I was in Thailand, I actually bought some gloves from the gym that I was at, and because my dad's moving away, I actually brought the gloves back to Japan. I didn't actually use them that much. I was usually using the gloves from the gym, but I bought a pair from the gym just to sort of contribute and help the gym. But so it's something a bit fun. I thought I'd pop them up in the background there, since I haven't used them actually very much. But I use the ones at the gym, and I go 2-3 times a week, and it's a lot of fun. Highly recommend it. The J-Vlog, you're very surprised that Japan hasn't moved to more geothermal given our prime location. I quite agree. In New Zealand we use geothermal quite a lot. In Iceland obviously they go crazy with it. Geothermal is a bit funny. In New Zealand we did find that when we really tapped it aggressively, that it would actually reduce what do you call it, the levels from it. But I used to live near a huge geothermal plant in central North Island of New Zealand. We lived in a very I lived in a very volcanic area in the centre of the North Island. So yeah, treadmill generators in every home. That's right. Everybody a hamster. I like it. But who knows? But the thing is, somewhere along the line, we kind of. I mean, there's been a lot of very quiet people putting solar panels on their roofs, and there's been there's not to say that there hasn't been positive progress. But I think we've really stopped thinking big about this, and we're seeing incredibly alarming news lately. So I really think that when we look at the fires in the Amazon, we shouldn't be thinking, oh, those terrible Brazilian people ruining our planet for us. We should be thinking, hell, we've got to get a move on and fix what we can fix ourselves. And that solution, thinking sufficiently big, should include solutions for the Brazilian farmers to give them better alternatives than cutting down and burning the forest. So it's a big, and actually it is probably the most important subject for all the stupid politics that there is, for all the Trumps, for all the Korea foreign relations. This is the humanity, and it's going to affect, certainly even within my lifetime, certainly my son's lifetime, it's going to significantly affect life on Earth. So, I think we have to think about it. Dan H., how are we going to solve the problem with air travel? And this is where, I must admit, I love air travel. And this is where I hope, rather than cut back, we can figure out a forward-looking way to address it. So that is I just caught that one, even though it's not aimed at me. And yeah, I admit, I think travel is such a, obviously, my life and the generations before me is based on moving, and I think it's a really important thing for humankind. But at the same time, it's a huge contributor to human emissions as well, and we have to figure out better ways to do it. Again, I mean, we are figuring out how to build more efficient airplanes, and we've sort of moved towards favouring that. And there's going to be new types of propulsion and whatnot. But yes, it's another big one. So yeah. Anyway, into news, and now that I've taken Korea out of my news cycle just for mental health purposes this week, what we are left with is Tokyo leads umbrella ownership in Japan. The Umbrella Promotion Society of Japan has released statistics, which apparently facts about umbrellas in Japan. As people know, I mean, there are so many umbrellas in Japan, and some people, it's like, and this annoys me, and I've ranted about this before, how, to a lot of Japanese people who would never, would find cash on a seat, and rather than collect it, they would hand it in to the police. If they see an umbrella and it's raining, outside of a convenience store, it's treated like public property. It's treated like they just take it and they go out and they use it. And someone who had an umbrella doesn't have an umbrella anymore, and it's raining, and it drives me crazy how people are this way. But yeah, for umbrella ownership, I believe the rate there is the how many umbrellas per person, and Tokyo has the highest umbrella ownership rate in Japan. 4.1 umbrellas per person, which also I think goes to show the kind of wasteful and disposable nature, particularly the vinyl ones that you get at all the convenience stores that people just buy whenever there is a fire. Oh, I just realized what happened there. Yeah. Was that a super chat or something? Something just got distracted. Someone just made a big noise that came through my headphones there. So yeah, through 4.1 in Tokyo, 3.9 in Kanagawa, which is, technically kind of Greater Tokyo, but there you go. And third is Kyoto Prefecture, 3.8. The prefectures are probably closest to New Zealand and less likely to use umbrellas. I still wonder what that sound was. Damn it, I can't see. Anyway. That's kind of freaky. Apparently Yamagata, Kagawa, and Tottori are the ones least likely to have umbrellas, but even then they're still having 2 to 2.6 umbrellas per person. So yes, that's Japan and its umbrellas. And Japan, apparently 12% of people have 6 umbrellas or more. We are probably here about a 3 umbrella per person household, and Japan actually has the lowest rate of foldable, collapsible umbrellas, only 21%, which is also part of the disposable sort of nature that they're treated with. Oh, is that right? Streamlabs member, new sub, is that what that means? JVlog, that's possible. And yeah, Streamlabs keeps updating and I can't keep up, so well, that's pretty nice if that's what that was. So yeah, awesome. 2.5 since one is a bit broken. Apparently the statistics here, police lost property data compiled by Nippon.com says 343,725 umbrellas were handed in last year, but less than 2% of that number were missing. I can also tell you this myself, not only the vast, if you go to a lost property office at a train station, I did this at my company the other day. I went to go and look for something I left in a meeting room, and the lost property is overwhelmingly umbrellas that nobody ever claims. So Yeah, that's true. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on with umbrellas in Japan. Apparently, I remember when the head of the New York Police Department came to Tokyo and he met with the head of the Tokyo. He was like doing a day tour of like the police boxes in Tokyo, and he asked them like, "What's the majority of the time you spend police work on?" And they said filing out forms for lost umbrellas. And apparently, the New York Police Commissioner who was touring at the time was dumbfounded. But there we go. It's, when you live in a peaceful country, that's what you get. What was this one about? Well, that's odd. Hang on a sec. This was probably a story. The link has been lost, so I will skip over that. This is an interesting one. You talk about the appropriation discussion. As you may or may not know, in Japan, if you ever want to eat lamb, particularly if you're in Hokkaido, and as a New Zealander, of course, I always want to eat lamb. You can get lamb barbecue, and it's called Genghis Khan, which is it's kind of funny. I don't actually know what the correct pronunciation is, but in English we've kind of probably sufficiently bastardized the name that we call it Genghis Khan. As I grew up in Japan, they call it Genghis Khan. And basically because of the association with mutton and lamb as being food that Mongolians would eat. And the Mongolian barbecue in Japan is called simply Genghis Khan. I don't know if they actually, well, it depends on your view of the great Mongolian leader. When I was a kid, of course, I believe even in Mongolia under communism, Genghis Khan was kind of treated as a kind of tyrant of history, although since post-communist Mongolia now holds him up as like a really revered leader. From the time when I was a kid, probably calling a food named after like a tyrant from that country, I mean, it makes you wonder what they would have called pretzels or spaghetti. But yes, no, the only country that the only actual world leader that they attach this to it, it's actually good PR. I mean, Genghis Khan is delicious. I've heard some people mention it. Some people think of it as overrated, and I'll kind of agree with that. If I'm going to have lamb, I want to taste the actual meat flavor of it, whereas Genghis Khan tends to have sauce over it, so it doesn't quite taste as lamby and muttony as I like. But all that aside, a Mongolian professor is, a woke Mongolian professor has called Japan out for its cultural insensitivity and appropriation of the name of the great Mongolian leader, who he explains is worshipped like a god, he says. I don't know if that's the right degree, but certainly he's a revered leader in Mongolia, and saying that simply slapping his name on a kind of caricature of their food is disrespectful. And I must admit, if Mongolian people were to tell us that Genghis Khan is kind of inappropriate appropriation, that wasn't intentional, but it just came out that way. But there we go. Is appropriation always inappropriate, or can appropriation be appropriate? I actually like to joke that as someone of Anglo-Saxon heritage myself, appropriation's a really big part of my own culture, and I'd really appreciate it if other countries would stop appropriating, if other cultures would stop appropriating, because I think it's a key part of Western culture to appropriate. But yes, we have Japan appropriating Mongolian culture, specifically the name of Genghis Khan, and someone saying, well, that's really disrespectful. And I'm kind of like, I've never heard this as a concern before, but it seems kind of legit. Oh, the Viking buffet, that's true as well. I've never really understood the Viking buffet. Jay's M, that's an excellent point. Sergeant Bilko, do you feel offended at the Viking buffet? Ask as someone Swedish. Hey, Yorkshire Heritage, Viking colony, and no, I completely don't care. The Japanese call all-you-can-eat buffets Vikings. In fact, well, not that that's really properly Viking. They were just basically a lot of tourists that didn't go home, who were pretty much in those days like soccer hooligans, from what I understand. That's how Yorkshire came about, from my reading on the subject. But yes, so I don't know. What do people think? Should Japan cut it out with the smorgasbord? Never heard of, but smorgasbord is quite common in North America. Yes, I've heard of smorgasbord. We don't use smorgasbord. We just say all you can eat in New Zealand, but there again, you don't really get all you can eat in New Zealand. But yes, but you've heard of how Japanese call smorgasbords Vikings. It's kind of cool if you ask me. You know, Genghis Khan as well as food that I like, but probably they can come up with something better. So yes, I thought that was interesting. Another random thought that I had this week. I had a steak, and I just come back from Phuket, and one thing that got to me when I was in Phuket was, I was going out with my dad, the Bai King. Well, that's right, that could be interpreted all sorts of different ways. When I was in Phuket, and I was going around with my dad on my final trip there before he goes back to New Zealand, so I'm probably not going to go back to Phuket, but we were, going out, we're having hamburgers a couple of days, steak, having Thai food, of course, as well. But one thing that got me was every time I ordered a hamburger, or every time I ordered a steak, I get asked, how would you like the steak done? And what would you like as a side of menu? And what kind of dressing would you like on it? And it's like, I would get kind of exhausted, like just being asked to make all the choices. I mean, I don't know, in Japan, no one ever asks you, what would you like? I mean, sometimes they do. It's not true to say that you never get asked how you like your steak done, but generally speaking, in most places, they don't ask you what you would like. They don't ask you to customize your meal. And I was reflecting after having a brilliant steak when I got back the other day. I kind of realized part of what was so enjoyable about that, and what had stressed me out, is when I realized that I was going to order a rump steak. And I was like, geez, how shall I ask for it? And they didn't even ask me. And I realized, they didn't ask me. And they brought it out. And it was like juicy. And it was like perfectly, just slightly pink and perfectly cooked. And it was delicious. And I was like, that's what I like about Japan. They just cooked it perfect, just nice. And I didn't have to stress out thinking about, how to ask it to be ordered. And it's kind of funny. I have New York friends who have come to Japan. And it seems to me that friends from New York seem to judge restaurants by, the quality of the restaurant by how much they'll customize for your order. In fact, I have New York friends who are obnoxious, who will actually test places out by asking, I'd like a hamburger, but could you remove the meat? I'd like a cheeseburger, but could you take out the cheese and put a little, sprinkling of parsley on it or some crap? And I'm like, dude, please stop it, you're embarrassing me. But this is kind of, I get it. In New York, there are restaurants, it's kind of this thing, and it reminds me when I go to America that, I find it exhausting ordering at restaurants there because they want you to decide so much stuff. I'm like, dude, if I could decide, like, the best way to have the food, I would be out the back cooking and you would be sitting here eating. Please. In Japan, when you go to a restaurant, where you presume the people at the restaurant have some idea what they're doing and you enjoy the food that they give you. Your job is to sit there and enjoy the food and shut up, and their job is to cook it, better than you're ever going to cook it. Whereas, it does remind me that when I go to America or countries like that, I feel like, I'm doing half the work myself, making all these damn choices that I don't want to make. And I realize this is the business model of Subway. But I got back in this, and the thing is, I became really aware when I realized every day I was getting asked, how to like it done. And I always grew up saying I like steak medium rare, but when I'm asking for a hamburger, I don't see the point in having a rare hamburger, right? So medium or well done or whatever. But seriously, you're cooking the hamburger, you figure it out. And so I was kind of and I started to realize, you start to get in these patterns, and it becomes, I imagine it becomes self-defining. You're a medium rare guy, you're a bloody rare, or you're a well done guy, or whatever, and you start probably attaching this to yourself. And it just occurred to me that, if I had been asked how I wanted that rump steak done the other day in this Japanese restaurant, I'd probably have messed it up. I'd probably have said, make it medium rare, and they probably would have done it too rare. Or I would have said medium or well done, they probably would have overcooked it. The chef just did it, and it was perfect, and they just cooked it nicely. And I swear, the next time I go to America and they ask me how I like my steak, I'm just going to say, just cook it nicely, please, and stop asking me questions. Leave me alone. That's what I've decided. Yes, that and tipping culture bother me when I travel, and they're things that when I come back to Japan and I realize that you don't have to think or decide anything pretty much other than just which item on the menu you want. You just give it to them, and they bring out fantastic food every time. And I've had friends say that they think Japanese food is overrated because you can't request anything, but to me that's the point. So yes, that's a little bit of a rant about the steak, but it just reminded me that a bit of customizability is nice every now and again, but it actually got really exhausting having it multiple days. Soppy in the UK. The UK has an enlightened middle ground system where they ask you how you like it and then deliver it medium rare no matter what you request. Sophie, that is funny. You got to laugh out of me on that one. And yes, indeed, I've traveled in the UK, and from a country colonized by the UK, you have the question probably getting into UK cooking is not a good idea. And believe me, I'm from the same culture, so you know, I consider it a self-criticism as well. New Zealand food has improved a lot, but yeah, it's not the best cuisine culture to be colonized by. That is the cover of the first CD I ever bought. It's Technotronic, The Best Remixes. This is a Japanese radio remix that I bought in Fukuoka in 1991 after buying a CDJ player that I bought on a school trip to Japan, where I came to Fukuoka for 2 weeks. And yeah, I just went on a really cool like YouTube rabbit hole during this week, where it occurred to me, I've seen so many awesome music documentaries on YouTube about the history of whatever group or whatever, and truth is, I still, for all of this time, I've always loved Technotronic, and for all of the songs, I mean, everyone knows like Get Up and Pump Up the Jam, of course, which were their biggest hits. But for me, when I got the CD, Rockin' Over the Melody is like one of my favorite tracks ever, and it was on the first CD that I ever bought. I listened to it like a million times, and it was kind of this quasi, not real techno, but kind of not exactly you know, pop music either. It was this Euro club music, but I thought within that genre it was really one of the best. And Yakid K, the vocal on it is awesome. I just love it. And you know, there was a whole time in the 80s when you had this kind of pre-hip-hop kind of time when there were a lot of like female MCs that like, and they had the same style. Nina Cherry had the same style. Yakid K had this sort of style of delivery that I love the rhythm of and the sound of, and the music was awesome. And it just occurred to me, I never knew anything about Technotronic, actually, the people involved in it. So I actually went down this rabbit hole about Technotronic, and about which led into like the entire sort of Euro club music scene from that time period, the late 80s and early 90s. And it was just really cool, and it was just kind of nice to rediscover. That's it. That's the first CD I ever bought. The second CD I ever bought was CNC Music Factory, which I bought on the same trip. And there were some good tracks on that as well, but this was like just something to listen to on a CD player, and it was perfect for the CD player, of course, as well. And I didn't know this was actually those tracks apparently were made in Belgium. I didn't even know that, and they were only intended to be released in Belgium, Netherlands, and Luxembourg. They weren't intended to be globally released, and they became these huge global hits. Yakid K, I had no idea, is from Zaire, but she lived in USA for a time, and then lived in Belgium, where she got hooked into this. But yeah, it was just really awesome, and it's kind of nostalgic for me. But it's always fun learning about the history of the music that you really enjoy. So that was a thing that I did. YouTube Premium. The only good thing on YouTube Premium is that shot that you see there, the Karate Kid TV series. It is actually really good. I pay for YouTube Premium. As I've said, what I find to be the best thing about YouTube Premium is that it kind of does something that MyChan TV does a little bit. MyChan TV lets you customize the list that you see and makes it easier to digest your subscriptions. However, the downloading on your mobile device feature of YouTube Premium, which allows you to basically load up your iPad or your phone for when you're going on like an air trip, or when you're going on the train and you're going to have, you know, and you don't want to pay for cellular data. That is so huge. I mean, it means that when I'm flying, when I'm not traveling for work, or you know, for vacations like I just did, my son, you know, and I, you know, you're not stuck with the entertainment system on the plane. You can catch up on watching all sorts of videos, catching up subscriptions, you know, watching series, and not just Netflix and stuff like that. With YouTube, yeah, you can actually catch up on so much cool stuff. So for me, that's the value of Premium is worth it for that. But you know, there is also this YouTube Originals content, and most of it's crap. I've only really looked at a couple that even drew my attention. Most of it doesn't even look interesting to me. I did look at the I watched the Weird City series because I was hoping there'd be some sort of Black Mirror Electric Dreams kind of, you know, what was the Google equivalent, and it wasn't that good, honestly. You can tell they put a lot of money into it, but I just didn't enjoy it. This is good, and you're going to be able to watch it even if you don't use Premium from September 24th, because YouTube's going to make it available with ads. So you're going to have to watch ads in order to watch it, but then you'll be able to watch it. You know, if you use YouTube Premium, you'll be able to watch it without ads. But I think it's actually it's a good move by Google, and it's well worth watching the Karate Kid series. It's pretty brilliant, actually, particularly if you're a fan, of course, of the original movie. So yeah, that was pretty awesome. If you're taking Japanese proficiency exams, look out. There are scam artists out there who have taken when I took the Japanese proficiency exam, it was called the JLPT, the Japanese Language Proficiency Test. and the name changed a few years ago to the NLPT, which I think is the National Language Proficiency Test, or Nippon Language Proficiency Test. I'm not exactly sure what the N is even, but apparently some people have cottoned on that people still look up the Japanese Language Proficiency Test, and there's a fake test out there, people registering and making people pay, particularly targeting Indonesians and Vietnamese. In fact, the people that were arrested were Vietnamese and Indonesian, so I guess that's why they'd be targeting them. But yes, targeting unsuspecting foreigners for the JLPT, which does not exist anymore. Now it is the NLPT, so don't get mixed up with that. Sergeant Boko asked a question: is YouTube Premium the same as Netflix with different catalog depending on region? I think it's global, and truth is the catalog is nothing like Amazon or Netflix, for example. It's pretty thin. There's nothing Japan specific, or at least nothing that I can recall being Japan specific, like both Netflix and Amazon and so on have, and Hulu has, for example. So I think that the catalog is the same. I could be wrong about that, but certainly I could watch Karate Kid, and I could watch the things that drew my attention right away. So I don't. Yeah, it's possible that there's, I mean, the way that I guess media licensing works, it's possible that there's content that's not available in Japan or Europe, but yeah, I believe it's the same. The truth is, it's a limited catalog, and if you get YouTube Premium, it's not the original content that you should get it for, and this is a good answer to that. I think the best thing is that downloading functionality, and that for me makes it worth it, but you know, that depends on how much you want to watch YouTube. Continuing crackdowns in Japan. In fact, just this evening I was had after Pokemon, the next show on TV, like that my 9-year-old's watching, is like a show basically kind of one of these immigration, police going hunting illegal overstayers in Japan, and kind of dark music and camera angles, and showing the Shinagawa immigration center, and kind of showing talking about the number of illegal foreigners, people working without permission, increasing. And I was like, holy shit, this show's gonna make my son racist against me. Change the channel. So I did. But yeah, it's kind of funny. Well, BBC, I didn't actually include it in the tweets, but I just saw just before the show that the BBC actually did coverage, for example, of the number of deaths, and the kind of way that the Japanese apprenticeship visa system, the slave labor system that Japan has, is messed up. So they're covering, but yet when this gets covered in the Japanese media, it's being covered more as a problem of the not so much the abuses of workers under the apprenticeship training visa program, but the number of apprentices who run away and become illegal immigrants in Japan. I mean, essentially, it's like you can imagine in the South, people are, during slavery, being more concerned with slaves running away than they are about abuse of the slaves. So that's kind of the way Japan's acting with this visa thing, and it's really bad for their image, and I hope that they realize this. I realize that a lot of farmers and a lot of small rural factories that can't get people to work in their factories, and certainly not for the rates that they need to be able to survive as businesses. But this is going to come back and bite Japan on the ass. But in the meantime, the government's very focused instead on enforcement. And yeah, they've deported more people than ever in 2018. Of course, they're letting more people in, so that would also have something to do with it. But yeah, the largest number from Vietnam, which is interesting because 152 from China. That's actually the largest group of immigrants in Japan, and a large number from Nepal. So it is interesting, and it's something to always, of course, take good care with. But yeah. Oh dear. Well, that can be a pain. It's a shame, actually. I know that sometimes you can get extensions on that as well if you go in and but it's hit and miss. Well, I think now I know people that this happened to, J-Vlog, and I think it's like 5 years. If you wait 5 years, you can come back again. But yeah, it does suck when that happens. And it's something to remember. I mean, again, this whole I'm not talking about the T word, but talking about the Democrat debates. And one of the things that drives me a little bit crazy about what's happening with the left in America, apart from the fact that they can't seem to actually figure out why they lost yet, and they're assuming that they're going to get a free run into the presidency next time, which take a horse's ass at the moment. That's kind of the joke that I say. But at the same time, under Obama, the Democrats wanted a 500-mile fence border with Mexico. Under Trump, they wanted like a 600-mile border fence, and the response to that is now the Democrat candidates are all like, well, we don't believe in fences and borders anymore. It's like they're tossing everything out. Yeah, you know, your right to immigrate anywhere outside of your own country is not a right. It's a privilege, and it's something to, you know, you've got to be really aware, because, you know, that's right, you are at the mercy of, right? And, you know, immigration detention is not a great place to be in. Quinn Rankin, Hiko Simon, does Japan have a preference where people come from? That's a good question. I don't think coming from New Zealand and Australia, which used to be very specific about the countries that people came from. I mean, Australia was just outright racist. I mean, until they used to actually have a white Australia policy. Japan doesn't have anything like that. That doesn't prescribe, you know, numbers of people coming from China or Vietnam or whatever. It does prescribe the numbers of visas that it will give out, and the categories of visa that it will give out, and the requirements for those visas. But yeah, I think the large number of Chinese are kind of a reflection in a way, because if there's paranoia about foreigners in Japan, it's primarily about Chinese, and the fact that they're the largest immigrant group and there's no restriction on it shows that no, Japan doesn't have an official policy-based preference on where people come from. Clearly there are some prejudices in terms of enforcement, and clearly there's targeting and there's differentiated treatment. For example, there's very large numbers of returned Nikkei Peruvians and Brazilians, for example. Large numbers of Koreans, who are probably the most naturalized and the most integrated. Large numbers of Chinese and Taiwanese. Large numbers of, you know, lately huge numbers of Vietnamese coming all of a sudden. Lots of Filipinos and lots of Iranians, and these are very large groups, far bigger than, you know, like Western sort of, you know, OECD type countries. And yeah, you can see, you know, and partly the way that these groups get visibility as well. You know, there was a time when Iranians were known for standing on all the street corners in Shibuya, you know, for no good apparent reason, and occasionally getting hit by the cops and getting caught selling drugs, and it developed a really bad image for them. So yeah, of course, you know, through the medium, whatever you can see, but yeah, the J-Vlog. Japan used to have a quota system. Not sure about now. So Japan has quotas by visa category, but as I understand, maybe they did used to have it by country. A lot of countries have visa categories by country, actually, and they do designate if you're from this region or from this country and you have these qualifications, you can come. It's always a bit of a political game in other countries, because of course immigrants can vote in New Zealand, so, you know, whatever parties get in, they'll favour, you know, conservatives will favour letting rich immigrants in, and liberal will favour having New Zealand's backyard Pacific Islanders come in. Given that foreigners can't vote in Japan, you don't really get that angle on it. So, no, I think the number of remember the number of North Koreans in Japan. There are no, they obviously don't, and that have always been here. So, you know, special case, but. Yeah, no, I don't think that there are nation-based categories. Chinese media, it's kind of funny, the Chinese Foreign Ministry, after crackdowns by Twitter, Facebook, and actually just the other day YouTube on Hong Kong related propaganda put out by Chinese government against Hong Kong protesters, has had those channels shut down, and the Chinese government has protested against Facebook, Twitter, and lately YouTube for censoring and shutting down and restricting their content that they've been trying to broadcast the Chinese government message to Western countries on these social media sites, without a hint of irony. They're saying, you know, they're complaining about YouTube shutting down 200 channels used for spreading state propaganda on YouTube, when YouTube is banned in China. It's kind of like, you know, yeah, it hurts. But that is that. Someone, I don't even know where this map came from, but I saw it getting sent around, and I hope it's real, because it is so funny. A lot of people pointing out that all the Japan-Korea problems might actually be a lot better if they were actually that far apart. And there was some commenting the other week about how very extremely similar in size and shape New Zealand and Japan are. I mean, they can be easily mistaken, but not that badly mistaken, surely. I mean, yeah, that's a great map, and, you know, who knows, maybe Japan just decided to buy New Zealand. I mean, I've heard that happens. Sometimes people just go and buy massive islands and relocate there. It can happen. So that was a thing that happened. That was kind of funny. This was a big topic the other day. How to say I if you're a guy. In Japanese, pronouns, like how to describe people around you, is probably one of the hardest things about the language. How to say I, how to say my wife, how to say you. There are so many words and their uses vary so much depending on the different situations. And they're not really grammar rules. They're almost like lifestyle choices. They're kind of statements about the kind of person you are, the kind of image that you want to project in the room. So for example, with I for guys, there was a survey of a very small survey of like 100 women between 30 and 39, which seems extremely narrow and specific as to which way they like men describing themselves. My 9-year-old calls himself oida, so not very popular, I guess, because they have annoying 9-year-old sons, probably a lot of them. Uchi, I've used uchi in the past. It's kind of and jibun, it's very baseball club sort of bukatsu type sports. Sports athletes often call themselves jibun in interviews. Watashi is formal and the default and the least likely to go wrong, although it will sound awkward in most circumstances, but it won't be impolite or wrong. Boku. I know a lot of people that use boku, actually. Boku is for guys, although sometimes women will use it. It's really associated with boys. It's kind of boyish, but you can be like probably into your 20s and get away with using it and being appropriate. Although that does sound a little bit like you still live with your mum. I had a girlfriend where I copied a few of her atashis a couple of times, and she was like, "Dude, no, just say ore," and don't even when I threw out boku once or twice, she's like, "No. Makes you sound like Mazakon, don't say it, say ore." So I stuck with ore, and ore is a really kind of strong way of saying I, and it's probably not really, people would say, it's generally not safe for work. It's not appropriate in the workplace, although I use it just because I can't be bothered switching and changing for different circumstances. But it's pretty strong. And I guess this is specific of probably people talking about what they would like people to use in private, but there we go. We got into on Twitter going through this and taking a survey. There were a lot of washis, a lot of whys. Why isn't a Tokyo thing. I've never heard that before, but I guess in some parts of Japan they'll describe themselves as why. Some of them say like ware and stuff like that, which is just getting weird. I've heard that in Shikoku they say boki, which has other meanings in Japanese, which I thought was funny, and I sniggered and laughed. Some people also talked about how wife is another thing that's really hard to describe, and it can reflect the way that you look. It can describe the state of your relationship. I like to summarize as such. If you are just married, you'll call your wife your bride, yome. It's pretty common for young guys or newlyweds to say yome. Again, this is men talking about their wives. When things settle down, probably the most common default is tsuma. There are other terms like kanai and nyobo, which you almost never hear getting used. Most older fellas who are pretty much staying at work to hide from their wives, and I assume are contemplating filing for restraining orders, would say kami-san. Kami-san's funny because it means literally God, which I suppose would come across possibly as goddess, which is true, but goddess in the sense of the angry goddess of the mountain. Waifu, that's a good point. Well, waifu, Filthy Frank's done a few good songs about waifu. Yeah, waifu's, yes, has taken on the connotation of a pillow, but yes, of course, some people will do it, so there we go. So that is I. I've talked before about how there are like phases and fads in Japanese news. Like there was a big fad for a few months of every time an elderly person had a car accident, it was like big news in Japan. NHK would carry it first, and it would sort of become, and apparently there was a big trend. There was a large decline in elderly motor accidents in the last like 3 or 4 months after this huge news fad, and people attributed it to all the news. It caused a lot of elderly people to go and return their driver's licenses. We've just seen a burst in the last few days of road rage triggered by this person and this particular, a number of particular incidents where this person went and picked up somehow he was able to get a BMW for a test drive, and he was allowed to take it out for 2 days, but he didn't bring it back for more than a week, and they didn't report it stolen. And while this guy was traveling around Japan in this BMW station wagon, he got into like 4 road rage incidents. So it was like, and some of these got caught on drive cam things, and he was just acting like a total crazy person, basically. Just they call it audiunting, which is like when bikers are like trying to intimidate people and slow them down by like waving wildly in front of them and trying to pull them over. And this guy would like get out of the car and go and hit people. And again, it's road rage, it happens everywhere all over the world, but this guy was just particularly kind of nuts. And the recordings were pretty clear, and he did this like 4 times. He went on this sort of rampage, and so he got arrested recently. But as a result, like every road rage incident in Japan now is now making the news. Is butter news a fad? No, but we're going to make it a fad. It'll start from the show eventually. We're building momentum very, very slowly, but it will happen. Like climate change, it's inevitable. Even if it takes a long time to build up, butter news will make it to the top. So anyway, there's been a lot just specifically because of that guy, and it's kind of been a thing. That's all the topics I've got this week, but look at that, I managed to get it without talking about anything career related in spite of all the craziness there. I just hope things just improve. Can't we all just get along? That's what I'd like to ask. We're exactly up on an hour, so I am going to go and have an early night. I'm not going to make some music tonight. Well, I might make some music, I don't know. Do people want music? I'm not really, I'm actually not even set up for it. So I think I will give it a skip tonight, but I will be back this time next week. Remember, you can follow me on Twitter and Facebook at facebook.com/EcoSimon and twitter.com/EcoSimon, same everywhere. Have a good week, Oh, a Kai review, that's a good point. I should do that sometime as well. Well, again, I'm not really set up for it tonight, but I should do that another time. And remember to like if you liked. Remember, look at that, we can get through Japan news, talking about Japan news and a bit of Brazilian news, as it turned out this week, without getting into talking about the big T or Korea. We'll see if I survive the rest of the week, not tweeting or getting too drawn into that sort of stuff. But love having you guys here every week and sharing this with you and having your comments and chat. So yeah, remember to like if you like, and have a good week, everybody. Kakite ano, keep cool till after school. Peace. Boom. End stream.